boy with the broken brain. Jim was devastated. His mind wasn't working like everybody else. So every night when his parents were sleeping, Jim would hide under the covers, shine a flashlight, and try to learn how to read better using comic books. His favorite comic was the X-Men, not because they were the strongest or the fastest, but because they didn't fit in. They were mutants. They were outcast, bullied, beat. The X-Men were told they were not worth anything, just like Jim. Yet Jim had no idea that his dream would come true. He would be an honorary X-Man. What inspired Jim was how every member of the X-Men had a hidden power to give to the world, a superpower that to develop, they trained at a special school, a place where lost, lonely souls could find a home and find their super friends. They call this Charles Xavier School for the Gifted, a place that would transform them from an outcast into the X-Men superheroes they were born to be. At 9 years old, Jim read in the comic books that the exact school that the X-Men were in was based in Westchester, New York, the same place he grew up. So every weekend he would jump on his bike and ride around the neighborhood from dusk till dawn looking for the X-Men school so he could find his super friends. Yet, as the weeks turned to months, Jim came to realize that the super school didn't really exist, and the boy with the broken brain was alone. By the age of 18, he'd reached a breaking point. School had become a constant struggle. He just wanted to run away. At that time, Jim had a friend who said, "Hey, why don't you come over with me over the weekend? I'm going to go visit my family in California. Come with, get some space, get some perspective." Jim went, and as his friend's father was walking Jim around the property, he asked Jim a really innocent question, a question you'd ask any 18-year-old. But for Jim, it was the worst question possible. How's school? Jim broke down. He just starts crying at this complete stranger because of all the pressure he's been facing. He opens up and tells this man his whole life story about the brain injury and the challenges he had growing up with learning difficulties. How he's going to disappoint his parents and be a bad role model for his younger brother and younger sister. He looks at Jim and says, "Why are you in school? Who do you want to be? What do you want to do? What do you want to have? What do you want to share?" Jim didn't have any answers. He'd never asked himself before. So the dad pulls out a journal, tears out a couple of pages of paper, hands it to Jim with a pen, and he makes him write down his answers. His answers to who do you want to be? What do you want to do? What do you want to have? What do you want to share with the world? When he was done, he starts folding up the sheets of paper to put it in his back pocket. The dad grabs the paper right out of Jim's hand, and Jim's freaking out because he wasn't expecting anyone to see his dreams, his fantasies, his goals. The dad starts reading these to himself, then looks at Jim and says, "Jim, you are this close to every single thing on that list." Jim thinks, there's no way. Give me 10 lifetimes, I'm not going to crack that list. And the dad then takes his fingers and puts them on both sides of Jim's head. "Right here," he says, "between your ears is the key. It's your mind, it's your brain. That's the key to unlocking the dream life." He walks Jim to a room of his home, and it's wall to wall, ceiling to floor, covered in books. Jim starts looking at the titles of the books, and they are biographies of incredible men and women throughout history, and some really early personal growth books. He goes, "Jim, I want you to read one of these books per week." Jim's thinking, have you not heard anything I've said? I have these learning difficulties and all of these learning problems. And suddenly, as if sensing his thoughts, the friend's father stops, and he pulls out all of Jim's goals, dreams, his bucket list, if you will. This time, he starts unfolding the paper and reading it to Jim, his goals, his dreams, out loud. And there's something about hearing your dreams coming from a stranger's voice, enchanted out into the universe. It shook his spirit. It shook his soul. Inspired, Jim goes back home and commits to reading one book per week. Yet, as the books start piling up, Jim still finds himself struggling to learn, struggling to remember, struggling to focus and concentrate. And pretty soon, he starts to despair. And that's when he saw this mug of tea. And it had an incredible genius named Albert Einstein, and a quote below Einstein that said, "The same level of thinking that created the problem won't solve the problem." And it hit Jim like a lightning bolt. It made him ask a new question. What's my problem? What's my actual problem? And the answer came surprisingly easily. Well, I'm a slow learner. I learn very slowly. I have a slow brain. Okay, so how do I think differently about this problem? Well, what if I could learn to learn faster? Right, what if I could learn how to learn? And Jim was like a man possessed. He began to discover everything he could about the brain, how to learn, how our memory works. And what he found out is that everything he thought he knew about the brain was false. How science used to think that after childhood, the brain could not change, and that our brain power would always be fixed and limited, when in reality, nothing could be further from the truth. Jim discovered that through neurogenesis and neuroplasticity, as we grow older, our brain's capacity can grow better. We can create new brain cells, new connections, and do things that are absolutely extraordinary. Even genetics, IQ, age, and injuries like the one Jim suffered, which can lead to forgetfulness, brain fog, learning challenges, can be overcome. But we just aren't taught how. If anything, we were taught a lie that our brain power is predetermined. But the truth is that there are a handful of tools, tips, tricks, and mental training protocols that anyone can easily learn that can give you seemingly superhuman cognitive abilities. Memory, problem solving, creativity, rapid learning, recall, speed reading, optimal brain states. One by one, Jim mastered them all. And the more he learned about how to learn, the faster he was able to learn. In fact, his progress was exponential. Over the next few years, he refined his skills, developed his own curriculum, and began to share his secrets of his success. Fast forward to today, and Jim Kwik is now the brain coach to some of the leading minds on the planet. People like Bill Clinton, Oprah, Richard Branson, Larry Page, Will Smith. And for almost 3 decades, Jim's been teaching students worldwide, including Fortune 500 CEOs and Hollywood celebrities, to improve their memory, read faster, and study effectively. Things that school never taught them, like how to be more creative, how to solve problems with lightning speed, how to focus like a laser or become hyper-productive, what to eat to maintain optimal brain health as you age, the daily habits and routines to keep your mind operating at its sharpest level, how to fix forgetfulness so we can remember everything from speeches we have to give to important facts and figures, new vocabulary and terminology, daily tasks, even learning how to remember names so that you can open doors to some of the most important and incredible opportunities. Just like it opened the doors to lead Jim to this incredible photo. Here's Jim to tell this amazing story.
So I remember this person's name, and that led to me speaking at 20th Century Fox for this chairman of 20th Century Fox and his executive team. And so I did my very best talk, and I don't know what it was, because I was in this playful state. It was a Friday, and walking into the boardroom, you saw like pictures of like Avatar and Star Wars. It put me in that state, right? And what happened was, It was my very best presentation, and afterwards the chairman looks at me and says, Jim, I want to give you a tour of the 20th Century Lot, and it's a closed lot in Hollywood. And when we were walking around the film sets, I noticed there was this movie poster of Wolverine, and I was like, oh, I can't wait for that new movie to come out. And he picks up his phone, and 5 minutes later, I'm in the Fox Theater with 3D glasses watching Hugh Jackman fight all these super ninjas. I mean, it was amazing. And afterwards, he's like, Jim, how was the movie? And I was like, oh, it was so good, thank you so much. And it's like, you don't know this, but I grew up with learning challenges, and I couldn't read as a kid, and I taught myself how to read by reading comic books. That was my whole infatuation with comic books and superheroes. And I was telling him, I was like, my favorite comic books growing up were actually Wolverine and the X-Men, because not because they were the most powerful, it's because they didn't fit in. And I'm telling this to the chairman of Fox, he's like, Jim, I didn't know you like superheroes, do you want to go to Comic-Con? And you know what Comic-Con is?
Right. Comic-Con is it was one of the biggest events, most popular events in America. Everybody, thousands of people come together to celebrate comics.
Exactly, and they dress up, and it's really wild. And it's in San Diego, and I was like, when's Comic-Con? He's like, it's today, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And he was like, do you want to go? And I was like, and I go from a 9-year-old to a 99-year-old. And this is a lesson in accelerated learning, because it's not chronological age. It's the age of our mind and the age of our heart, right, our spirit. And I start thinking about all these excuses, because I was a kid, and I'm thinking, no, now I'm 99. It's like, oh, how do I get to San Diego on a Friday? Oh, I have all these meetings here in LA. Oh, I have nothing to wear. Oh, there's gonna be traffic. Oh, I have to wait on lines. And it's so interesting how adults talk their way out of opportunity, right? And so I always tell people, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them, right? People are always saying, oh, I'm not smart enough, or I'm not good enough, oh, I'm just not, my memory is not good, I'm getting too old. And again, if you argue for your limits, you get to keep them. So he's looking at me, he's like, Jim, do you want to go or not? I'm going tomorrow. I was like, oh, the chairman of Fox is going, I want to go with you. So the next morning, he picks me up, Saturday morning, and we go, and instead of driving, we get on his plane, and I swear to you, Vishen, the entire cast of X-Men is on that plane. I mean, think about, I'm 9 years old in my mind now again, and there's literally, I don't even see like Patrick Stewart and Hugh Jackman, I see like, I see Wolverine and Professor X, and I'm sitting between Jennifer Lawrence and Halle Berry, and we're going to Comic-Con, right? And we go and we spend an incredible day together, and on the way back, the chairman of Fox is like, how was your day? I was like, this is the best day ever, thank you so much. He was like, I have something else for you. I'm like, I don't want anything else, what can I do for you? He was like, Jim, they really loved you, how would you like to go on set? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, we're filming the new X-Men movie in Montreal.
Wow.
Another 30 days, how would you like to go? I was like, oh, I've never been on set, I would love to go. What can I do for you? And he's like, Jim, just teach them what you taught us. Teach them how to unlock their superpowers. Teach them how to speed read their scripts, how to memorize their lines. And I was like, I can totally do that. The next morning, next Sunday, we're on what they call the X-Jet, going to Montreal, and I got to share with my heroes, and I got to see them on set come alive.
Wow.
And when I got back home, that photograph was waiting for me. This photograph of me and the entire cast of X-Men. And even better than that, though, was this note from the chairman. And this is world class. Big heart. He says, Jim, thank you so much for sharing your superpowers with all of us. I know since you've been a child, you've been looking for a superhero school. Here's your class photo.
Wow.
Where's our superhero school? And that's why I love partnering with you with what we're doing, because when are often people having conversations around superpowers and genius and meta learning? I mean, all these skills that will give people greater levels of performance and peace of mind.